Kadeem Leslie, the man, the myth, the legend. You have been very busy all the times, it seems. You have been getting straight A's in the college. You have been publishing books, all that while running a successful R&B business. How did you achieve that?
So that's a great question. Airbnb actually came to me out of desperation, but since then, we've been able to scale from bedroom to home, eventually actually going out of state and out of country. So it's actually been quite a journey, and being able to teach people on how to do Airbnb has always also been interesting. It's from scaling from $300 a month, which was my first bedroom, to scaling to $40,000 a month, between 40 and $50,000 a month now. It's been a pretty wild journey.
Pretty wild. You mentioned desperation that drew you to this business model. What do you mean by that?
So when I say desperation, I started Airbnb in college, right? So that's how we started. And what happened was that I was on track to rent a bedroom from a single family landlord in college. And then it turns out that one day I was sitting down with my landlord and realized, hey, I actually can't afford this bedroom. And so if he could come up with an alternative, then I could make that work. So then what I actually decided to do was move out of that bedroom, move on to the couch of that house, rent my bedroom. And then turns out the first month I was able to do that, I put it up on Airbnb, VRBO, Craigslist, you name it, booking.com, Facebook, everything I could think of, right? And then really stuck the landing. And so the first month I was able to make my rent. Then by the third month, I was making double my rent with one bedroom. And then by a couple months after that, I got more bedrooms in that house. Then that landlord started to recommend me to their friends, and then I got more houses in the area. And before you know it, I was doing such a good job with managing these properties. Of course, it didn't happen by accident. I was spending hours and hours pouring over information because I had to eat food and I had to find a way to make money. And so what happened was that I got so good, I got recommended, and it was by word of mouth. Eventually, we had a portfolio while I was still in college that was making quite a bit of money. So that was pretty exciting. But yeah, it started from
Mm.
desperation, the mother of all inventions.
You mentioned that you get popular with the rent owners with word of mouth. What role does customer service play in your business? And how do you ensure a consistent, high quality experience, not only for the people that give you their houses, but for the guests as well?
Oh, absolutely. Customer service is everything, right? Because Airbnb is a hospitality business. And now a lot of people will get into Airbnb and they will think that it's completely passive. No, Airbnb is not a passive business. Can be made to be mostly automated, but you have to remember the difference between a hotel and an Airbnb is that Airbnb does have that personal touch, right? It allows you to have that close connection with people at the end of the day. That's a difference. That's why people are coming and flocking to Airbnb. It's for that personal connection. And so then what I remember my first few guests, I remember actually my first guest, I won't say the name there, but I remember who she is and she had a daughter. And what we did for that first guest is that she came, we spoke with her on I think that was the kitchen counter at the time. We had fruits for her. We had croissants for her. She got the entire work because that was my first guest. And so I wanted to really blow her expectations away. But that just goes to show you that was my very first guest. And we went over and above in terms of customer service and responding quickly to guest concerns. Another one, calling people by their first names. I tried to memorize, even though it's been thousands and thousands of people. I remember there was one Christmas that someone called me on the phone and I picked up the phone and I remember the accent of the person who called. And I said, wait, is this XYZ? And I didn't have their number saved, but she was so surprised that I remembered his name. But that's the level of customer service that really comes into Airbnb. And of course, he was able to book with me again for the entire December period. And of course, that was a premium, but he willingly paid it because of that personal touch. So again, customer service is everything in this.
I think in this business, but going beyond the expectation really attracts customers in any business. And speaking about this business, I assume you have several properties that you manage right now. How many is it in total, and how do you manage them effectively so you can have time to travel?
That's a great question. So I will answer the first question. We have between 12 and 16. I say that because we may be upgrading soon, and that's in a few different places. So right now, I think we're at about 8 in Atlanta, Georgia. And then we have quite a few in other states and other countries. So it's been very interesting to have the portfolio grow like that. But what you also find is that, to answer your question, so when you are scaling to that degree and being involved in multiple states and countries, you have to find good people that you can partner with, right? You have to find people who you treat fairly, people who understand that they are on the same page, people that you can communicate well with. They have my personal phone number. If anything goes wrong, they can call me. People that have clear guidelines as to how we operate, right? For example, you know that this is what you are handling for this property, and everything above that I will handle, or the other way around, right? But it's really clear expectations on what's going on. And so having those kind of relationships and having that kind of partnership, it really, when it comes down to it, is having good business practices, being someone that's honest, and expressing that leadership capability. I think Airbnb really gives you a chance to do that for yourself, because it's a really good starter business for most people that you can really grow into a really giant, network of investing.
So, how do you find the right people to work with? And most importantly, how do you find the right properties to invest?
Those are two different questions. So how do you find the right people? There is an element of going with your gut feeling. You have to listen to your gut feeling. And that's not something I think that you can just find and read in a book. Someone can check off all of the qualifications that you are looking for. They have experience, they're trustworthy. But if your gut is telling you no, you should listen to your gut and you should not go with that person. For whatever reason, just listen to your gut. On the other hand, you can find people that have the right attitude and they've never done this before, but then they turn out to be one of the best partners you've ever had. And that's actually happened to me a couple of times, because again, you have to trust your gut feeling, right? You can always train information, but you cannot train attitude. Again, I'll repeat that. You can always train information, but you cannot train attitude. And so gut feeling is correlated with that attitude. And so the other part of your question, which is how do you find seized properties? You can buy, or you can rental arbitrage, is getting a landlord to agree to rent you their property. And this is I'll spill the beans here on a couple of secrets, right? So listen close if you're watching, we're going to really dig in here. So here's how you go and approach a landlord, right? So for one, you're going to go on Marketplace, Facebook Marketplace, Zillow, Craigslist, wherever you find listings in your area, apartments.com. I'm not sure wherever you are in the world right now, but wherever they're listing apartments, you just need to get in touch with a property owner, not with a leasing agent, not with a realtor. You need to get in touch with the person who actually owns the property, the decision maker. And here's what you're going to go to them and say, hey, I'd love a tour of the place. I have a company that manages properties for other people. We sign corporate leases. And what we do is that we accept travelers and executives and families that are displaced or traveling to the area. They stay for a couple of weeks, and we'd love to use your property and add it to our rental or property management portfolio. You say something along those lines, and now you're opening up the conversation for a business to lease the property that they have. Or what you're going to do is say, hey, we'd love to add your property to our portfolio. What would the rental negotiations start? Now, what that does is that you're not saying, hey, we're going to take a commission from renting out your place. No, what you're saying is that you are going to pay that landlord a fixed fee every month. And then on top of that, you're going to make money from Airbnb, Craigslist, VRBO, wherever else, right? But that's the arrangement that you're making with them. And the reason why you want to start with negotiations is because they need to understand that they are no longer just renting to a tenant. They're renting their property to a company. And so then it doesn't become you're renting to a person. It's a different power dynamic in terms of now you're talking to a company, and the company as a professional tenant now becomes, hey, you are working with a company. Let us work out something where we can have a relationship that lasts potentially for 3, 4, 5 years instead of just a 6-month or a 12-month lease. Very different power dynamic. And then so once you go in there and have this type of language with landlords, you'll find very quickly that, hey, they're actually open to renting to businesses like yours because it would be the same as renting, for example, to an insurance company that places displaced families if there is a disaster in the area, or renting to a college, for example, that places students. The same exact process, except you are using primarily Airbnb, VRBO, etc.
So my question would be, I suppose that comes with some risks involved, especially when you're not able to maintain fluidity of the financial. How can someone tackle that, especially if he's new in the game?
Absolutely. So you have to know your numbers first. And so there are a couple of ways to enter the market, and there's a couple of ways to make sure that you are hitting profit, right? Remember that profit, there are two sides to profit. You need to optimize revenue, and then you need to decrease your cost, right? So then one, the base cost, which is the biggest cost, is going to be your lease. So then you're going to want to negotiate your lease as far down as possible. Getting them to say yes is the first step, but once they say yes, you're going to enter that negotiation period where perhaps you can ask them for the first month off, or ask them to push the deposit to the last month, for example, or ask them, once you pay consecutively for 6 months, ask them to give you that 6-month break in that lease. So then you can save in the 6 months or the third month or even 9th month or the last month. Again, these are some ways that you reduce your cost. Now, if the property is too high, it is fine to go ahead and give up that property, because it's better not to sign a bad deal than to force yourself into a bad deal, then find yourself with a property that's not earning you money. And then I will also say that as a protection against yourself, you can always include in the terms of your negotiation, everything is negotiable. In your lease, you can always put in, if for whatever reason someone wants to exit the lease, no, you can say, what I'm about to say may be used against you. But again, the benefit is actually better than the downside. But in the lease, you want to say, if for any reason someone wants to terminate the lease, it can be done in 60 days. So what does that do? It limits how much you can lose on this deal. So then if you find yourself not able to profit or not able to break even in the first 3 months, you can say, you know what? I'm out of this. I'm going to give it 60 more days. And then it's just a matter of trying to break even or trying to not lose all of your money for those 60 days. And then you can pull back out and then try again with a new property. But you'll still have the furniture and you'll still have all of the things that you bought for that first property anyway. You'll just be moving it over to that second property with probably a lower rate or in a better location, right? The beautiful thing about Airbnb, it's not a matter of, you can imagine a cup, right? If you are losing money, the stakes of you losing money on an Airbnb deal are very low. Because let's say you rented a place, for example, for $2,000, but then your booking coming in, you're not going to lose the entire $2,000 because the likelihood of you not booking anything for the entire month is very low. What will actually happen is that perhaps you're not getting over that 2,000. So it's not a matter of, are you going to make bookings or not? It becomes a matter of, how far are you going to fill that cup? So will it be above the $2,000 line? Will it be enough to make a lot of profit, or will it be just below the $2,000 line? In which case, you may lose $500 or $100 or even $700 or $1,000, but you're not losing the entire 2,000, which is good. Most businesses don't operate that way. So that's really great, and you're not losing. It's not a high commitment compared to other businesses. Let's say, for example, you start a restaurant. That's a lot riskier to enter, and it also has a much higher risk rate than Airbnb. So in terms of risk, I would say Airbnb is a really good business, again, for risk. And then once you get those costs down, it becomes less risky. I would also say one other thing. So in terms of finding properties like this, there's a way that I teach people to find how much a property can do in terms of revenue before even getting their property by doing research in the area. I teach that to private students who pay for it. But I would say that if you do your research before, there is no reason why your property should be losing money, because research should be able to tell you how much a property can do, what other people are looking for in the area, and also how much the occupancy rates are in the area before you even sign that lease. And so that comes with preparation. And so then once you do these things, it doesn't become a guessing game, and it doesn't become a space where you put in your money and then you're saying, or you hope or you wish. It becomes, I'm expecting between this And this, you have a low end and a high end. Worst case scenario, you're earning 500, you're earning 1,000. Best case scenario, you're earning $4,000 or $5,000 per month in profit. That's just some of the tips that you've learned over the years.
Preparation in all of the business and in life, just general, increases your chances of succeeding and decreases the chances that you're gambling with your time, energy, resources, or money. And about the filling the cup, I understand that location is critical for success. There won't be much success if you rent a place that really doesn't have any tourists. And I also do understand the value of marketing. Can you share some more insights and tips on those two aspects?
So here's a very interesting thing about location. So it is not a black and white situation when it comes to location. And let me explain what I mean by that. When it comes to location, it doesn't mean that if you are in the city, you're going to, because there are many people who thought that in the pandemic, they went and got a lot of locations in the city. And then after the pandemic, once a lot of people actually started to travel overseas to other places, those places in the city actually didn't make as much money. And some are losing right now, especially because of over. So that doesn't mean necessarily to make a lot of money. Now, if you have, for example, but you're just putting something up on Airbnb and thinking that it's going to make a lot of money just because it's in the city, the days of that are just not anymore. Maybe back in 2015, but just not today. That doesn't work anymore. So I will say what's actually happening right now is that Airbnb has maybe 9 months, actually families, bigger groups of people. And so what you're actually finding is that families are being pushed. Experiences. If you go to the first page of Airbnb, it's talking about experiences. Bigger group. Why? Because hotels can't really host people who are coming with 9, 12 people. They can, but the cost difference is ginormous. You can find a family of 12, you can host them for $200, $500 a night, whereas a hotel, that would cost you $2,000 a night. The disparity is incomparable. So then what you find is that if you have a large property that's close enough to the city, then you'll get booked out, and you can get booked out quite a bit. What we had, for example, in Texas, there was a place that was 40 minutes outside of the city, but it could hold 16 people. That place was booked out 3 months in advance. Now, we don't have the place anymore. It switched to a long-term, but I'm just showing you some of the possibilities that it doesn't necessarily have to be in the city. It is about just finding that supply and demand. Again, which I do teach students how to do.
Makes total sense. So again, we are just circling back to preparation, doing your work, market research, and getting the numbers right. What about the law and the regulation? In my country, where I'm from, it changes very frequently. So how can one stay ahead of the game and ensure the law are not affecting his rental business?
Okay, so what you find is that most places in the world don't have an outright ban on Airbnb. Now, if you're in a country that has an outright ban on Airbnb, then there's very little I can do for you. However, what most places have is a restriction on the type of Airbnb listings that you can have. For example, New York City has one of the strictest guidelines in the world. For example, in New York City, you have to only rent private rooms, and the owner of the Airbnb listing has to be living there as well. And that's really wiped out a lot of the Airbnb properties in New York City. But then that doesn't mean that you can't have an Airbnb, right? Because if you're an owner living in New York City, you can still have an Airbnb and rent room by room. That didn't change for you, right? In fact, because all of the other listings went out, you are probably benefiting from all of traffic now, because what's happening is that those homeowners that have room by room in New York City, they're renting rooms for $100 a night now. Insane, right? But they're fine. So what would have been $50 or $40 right now is going for $100 in New York City. So that's really good. So then to answer your question, it is a matter of thinking a bit more creatively about how you can do Airbnb. For example, there are spaces where you are not allowed to sublease, right? I know that this is common, especially in European countries. You are not allowed to sublease. Okay, no problem. What you can do instead is partner with owners. Don't sublease. You can have an arrangement. They're not going to rent the property to you and then you put it on Airbnb. You convince owners the same process that we talked about earlier. Go to owners, go to 10, get one yes, 9 no's, no problem. But get one yes, get a homeowner to say, hey, I will partner with you. We'll split profits, right? I will do everything. You can split 50-50, 60-40, 70-30, depending on who is doing what. And then get them to put their property on Airbnb, and then you co-host for them, right? That way you can be hands-off. You can hire someone to clean. Good to go. There are so many ways that you can make Airbnb work. And it's just a matter of thinking a bit more creatively about whatever the restrictions are in your area.
What about some operational issues that a renter might face, like complaints, maintenance? How do you tackle that?
Of course, you have to be as responsive as possible to complaints, right? You can't take 3 weeks to respond to guest complaints. I say that in jest, but you have to respond as quickly as possible. My go-to rule is that you want to respond in 3 minutes to every guest message, especially if it's the first time they're messaging you on the platform. You want to respond in 3 minutes. I know that's not always possible because you sleep. But if you see something on your phone and you can respond within 3 minutes and you want to hit that 3-minute mark, it's the best way to go. I say 3 minutes because that's just been my experience. It has been the experience with people around me. 3 minutes is that mark. 5 minutes, it gets a little bit worse. 10 minutes, definitely gets a little bit worse. 2 hours definitely gets a bit worse. So you want to hit that 3-minute mark. And then in terms of maintenance, obviously, as you get into, the market for the first time, just like in any industry, you're going to have to develop those relationships for wherever you are, right? What you'll find is that over time, you'll have someone that can work on plumbing and you have a relationship with them where you can save, a few dollars on repairs every now and then. But I will also say if you are renting a place from a landlord, then what actually happens is that if the plumbing breaks due to no fault of the guest or anything like that, then that's the responsibility of the landlord in most places around the world. If the heating breaks, right? Any of the HVAC systems, if the roofing is leaking, if there's an infestation with rodents or something, that's the responsibility of landlords. And so that actually diminishes your risk if you're not a homeowner. Again, that would be the responsibility of the landlord to fix those problems as soon as possible. And so high ticket costs, your landlord needs to fix that as quickly as possible, which is great. But for small things, again, you can develop those relationships. We definitely have relationships because we both own and rental arbitrage properties. So we have those, and we have quite a network of people. I will also say the cleaners for your Airbnb business is the most important part of your Airbnb business. They make or break your Airbnb. But what other people find is that they struggle to find effective cleaners that are low cost. And so then what we teach our students to do is to find low cost cleaners that you can pay per hour. So instead of spending $200 to clean your property every time, what you actually end up spending is perhaps $40, $50, $60, or $70, which is a major cost saving. Makes your business more profitable.
I understand that fully. It's a number game in the end. But let's take it down a note. What's the strangest request you've ever received from a guest, and how did you handle it?
We've had guests outright asked to have parties or events. There have been guests that, they'll want to have a wedding after party at one of our properties. Normally, of course, we can't have that, although it would be nice. Of course, the liability and the insurance and the cleanup would just be too much. We've had guests want to film movies at our places. That happens actually quite a bit during the pandemic. People wanting to film cinematic experiences at the places. So they'll request that, hey, we have equipment coming in. Can we do that? Besides that, I haven't really had too many weird requests. We've had fights in our Airbnbs. We've had gunshots at our Airbnbs. I'm not sure if you'd consider that weird, but those aren't requests, right? Those are just experiences that we've had. We've entered to bloody scenes where cleaners came in and were shocked. We've had those things, but those weren't requests. But we've had a couple of experiences that you have to deal with those things. It's just a part of doing business.
Fights, guns, movies. Sounds crazy. If your properties could talk, what's the wildest story they would tell?
Probably one of those stories that involve violence. That would be probably some of those stories. Yeah, definitely. It's a part of doing business. And I don't want to scare anyone that's thinking about getting into Airbnb, because by percentage wise, I've hosted, I don't know, 5,000, 10,000 guests by now. And maybe of those, less than 50 have been really terrible. And so by percentage wise, that's not even 1%. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so if that's going to stop you from getting into Airbnb, I don't want that to be the case. And so I've just been doing it for a very long time. And if you're going to scale to that big of an operation, then the chances of something happening just gets greater. And that's all. But it doesn't become more frequent. What actually you find is that most people just want to have a good stay. Most people just want to be happy and experience a couple of days away from their reality back home, come here, have a good time and go back home. And a lot of people are also traveling for work, right? And just want a safe space that they can call home at night. And so most people aren't terrible. And that's the wonderful thing about Airbnb. You can meet people from all over the world. And I think that's what I think. If you are thinking about Airbnb, that's what you should focus on. The 99% that goes amazing.
I'm going to ask you a tricky question right now. If you had to start over with only $1,000 in your pocket and no properties, network whatsoever, how would you rebuild your empire?
That's an easy question because I would still have all the knowledge that I have right now. For one, I know how to get the information. I know how to get the results. And so once I start generating results, that would bring a lot of money. And then on the back end, I would be co-hosting, right? So if I couldn't have enough property to start myself, which is good, I say a good answer for someone who perhaps doesn't have the knowledge yet, is that you can learn how to co-host. And that's a lot easier to learn as a business model because what that involves is you being available for guest requests, being able to respond in 3 minutes. That's very important. So always having your phone on load, right? Being able to be very communicative, being very attentive to guest needs, being able to communicate with Airbnb in terms of if there is an arbitrage between Airbnb and the host, the primary host, you as the co-host is able to step in and say, hey, I will call the guest. I will make sure that things are fine. I will smile with them. I will talk to them as if they are people who are worthy of respect and dignity, which they are. I will get them on the phone, make them smile, calm them down. These are things that you can do and anybody in the world can learn that doesn't really have specialized skills in terms of you don't need to learn how to code, for example. This is just being a good person, learning a few communication skills. This is something that you can learn off YouTube to be a good co-host. And so if you're just with $1,000, that's where I would start with Airbnb. And then once you have enough to get your own property, I would start with 1 bedroom, get to more bedrooms, and then keep going that way. The reason I like the bedroom as a starting model is because whatever the economy is doing, your bedrooms will always be booked. And I want everybody to hear me right now. If you are starting an Airbnb, the easiest way to start is the bedroom by bedroom model. Because all you're doing is taking a bedroom and putting it up for someone who wants to stay for a night, 2 nights, 1 week, 2 months, and then renting that. And if you are in the city or close by the city, that place is always going to be booked. Of course, if it's at a reasonable price, because if the economy is up, people will still want to travel for a budget. And if the economy is down, people are still going to have to travel. They're just going to travel at a lower scale. And all the luxury properties in a time of recession, they're going to go to business, which is exactly what happened in 2020. So if you're starting, that would be a good place to start.
Also, a good place to start if you want to start R&B business is to reach to Kadeem, who can guide you step by step. But it wasn't always the case, right? In time before, you have been a student and you actually haven't been successful at all. You had bad grades. You went from the bottom to the top, to the point that you actually realized that everything is possible with the right mindset. And you decided to write a book for other students that are still struggling with achieving good grades. So I wanted to ask you, what made you that switch that motivated you to get good grades, get good in life?
That's an excellent question. So I would say I actually never told this story before. This will be an exclusive. All right. So here we go. So what actually happened when I was having bad grades was that, well, my mom had just passed and I entered the high school. This was about the 7th grade. Plus it was high school. And so in 7th grade, I was trying to figure things out. A teenager, not really knowing which way is up from which way is left. Right. And I remember my father sitting me down and said, if you keep on this path, you're going to have a very hard time. and you have to figure out if you want to go to college or not, because these grades are not going to get you. And that was like seventh, eighth grade, right? I had gotten suspended, I'd gotten detention, and I was just doing everything that was bad. And so, I was like failing math, failing French. So what the turning point was that I started to play the cello. Music had a way to direct my energy. And then I actually found a mentor in music, and that actually started a real turning point for me. And so in about the ninth grade, I was able to start my first business. It was a nonprofit. It did okay. But then, of course, the first business that you start is probably the one that takes you. So I was able to start, fail, start, fail, start, fail as a teenager, which was very good, very helpful. So then by the time I started my real estate business, I actually had years of experience that had a higher likelihood of success. And as you go on and start more businesses, everything and all of the failures or successes that you learned before, you get to take them on with you to the next one, which is a really good thing about entrepreneurship. So to go back to that story, I was actually failing. And then because I decided that I needed to get to college, and a mentor started to show me that, hey, if you want to get to college, it's a matter of you deciding, and you can take matters into your own hands and change who you are. And so then that's what I decided to do. And I read a book called Cybernetics. I think one of the best self-help books I've ever read, and perhaps will ever read, Cybernetics. And there's another one called Think and Grow Rich. And the essence of those two books was taking your life into your own hands. And from that moment, from those two books, reading them, I decided that I get to decide who I want to be. I can be a failing student, but then if I change my identity to being someone that got straight A's, I could do it. And the way I would do it is to study other people who had similar identities and then just do what they did. And then eventually, given enough time, I would have the same identity and I would have the same behaviors, which would equal the same results or better. And that's what happened. So then I actually started to study what top students were doing. And then from ninth grade, I moved from last in my class. I remember I was 30 out of 35. This story is actually in my first book. I was second to last, and my best friend was last. It was just me and him, right? And so I was able to move from 33rd to 33rd to 21 to 17 to 11, 7, 3, and then number 1 by the time I graduated high school. So then I went to college as number 1 from my high school, highest GPA. And then I was able to do the same thing in college. Again, starting in college, yes, you had mastered all these skills, but college is now a new beast. And so you have to learn to study all over again. And so, of course, starting college, starting a business, trying to figure out who you are, the person, all that is going on, and appreciate just working overtime and trying to figure out life all at once. But then I knew who I wanted to be, which is a straight A student. So it wasn't really a question of whether or not it was a priority. So I kept studying all of the people that I knew were possible straight A students and just did what they were doing. And so then that's what I wrote down in my first book, what those students were doing.
Can you walk us through the specific strategies that you observed in top students that helped you develop the system?
The short answer is that's in the book. But, I will give you one, for example, that's in the book. Top students write a lot more than the average student. They write a lot more. And what you actually find is that this continues into adulthood because it becomes a habit of writing. And I don't think it's ever been explained to most people like how it's broken down, how it was broken down for me after I started to research why that might be the case and how I broke it down in the book. So I will explain that concept for you. And what we found is that there's a German philosopher called Hermann in like the 1970s or something like that. And most of what we know about memory today was actually started from him. And so we have something called the memory curve that lets us know that we forget about 70 or 80% of what we learn within 3 days. 3 days, right? Now, if you're going to retain anything at all, and you have class on Wednesday, and your next class is not until next week, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, by Saturday, you've forgotten 70% of the information. So then let's say just between Wednesday and Monday, if you were to just open the book twice. So then now you're opening the book on Thursday, and then you open again on Saturday, So then when you come back on Monday, instead of starting with a 70% gap in your information, now you're just starting with a 20% gap, much less information to remember. And it doesn't have to be going into your book and studying for an hour on Thursday and Saturday. Actually, 10 minutes is enough to stop that from happening. And that's mind-blowing. So then you're actually being more productive by spending another 10 minutes. So some of the tricks like that are in the book, and it breaks it down really dynamically in multiple scenarios. But using those strategies, people are able to improve their grades from C to A students. People are able to get their law licenses, their realtor licenses, pass medical exams using the strategies in the book. I'm telling you, it's not from me. I'm just giving you the information that works. I used it for myself. Other people have used it. And so if you want to take those same strategies, I really highly suggest reading that book.
Repetition. If you don't use it, you lose it. And even the latest findings from the studies about the brain, when you get exposed to new information, they say that new neurological pathways are made, but after some time, they got dissolved really, really fast. But
Absolutely.
what I wanted to ask, that's going to take time. And how can a student manage their time effectively?
So there's a couple of things that I actually believe when it comes to managing your time. And when it comes to managing your time management is just prioritization. I'll tell you a quick story. If I ask you right now, do you have 4 hours tomorrow? So, and if I ask you, will you have 4 hours tomorrow to drive me to somewhere in Thailand? I'm not sure. But if I asked you to drive me for 4 hours, you'd probably tell me no, right? You don't have time, right?
Right.
Right. That's probably what you say. Okay, cool. No problem. But then here's what happens, right? If your home had a flood, would you find 4 hours to fix that flood tomorrow? Because then that becomes a priority. And once you see the world that way, it becomes, okay, I know that I have 4 hours because you know, and we just proved that you have 4 hours tomorrow. So then what then becomes the top priority tomorrow? And if you ask yourself that every night and then outline what your priority is for tomorrow, and it really is just 3 or 5 things, and just do that every day, then you'll find you'll make so much more progress in 3 months. Because what most people get up and do is wing it. They're just doing whatever comes next on their plate. But if you actively make whatever is a priority, 3 to 5 things, big things every day, and just get that done, you'll find that then becomes a really good way to prioritize. And it really is usually not more than 3 to 5 things.
But I literally imagine is having a gun pulled to my head and the person is going to pull the trigger if I don't do that thing. And maybe that's a good way to see life if you're struggling with discipline, motivation, and all of those things that really drive you toward your success. You mentioned
Right.
that you had a mentor. What role did he play on your success, and how can students find mentors that can help them?
That's a great question. So I would tell you, I've had multiple mentors, and my approach to mentors is to have multiple mentors in various stages of your life and various aspects of your life. And so the mentors I had when I was a teenager, I have a few of those mentors now, but not all of them, because I have different mentors now for different things, right? So it changes. And then also the mentors that I have for business are not necessarily the mentors that I have, for example, for relationships. Those are different areas of your life, and spirituality or mental health or whatever, right? So it's different areas of your life that you can have different mentors for, or even leadership versus communication, two subject matters, but different mentors, right? And so how do you develop relationships with mentors? I will tell you, there are 2 ways that I think about mentors. One, you can have mentors that you never meet, and that's totally fine. Most of my mentors are people I've never met, and they don't know I exist. How is that possible? Because they have books, they have courses, they make YouTube videos, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They make podcasts. They don't know I exist, but I've made so much money, so much knowledge, and I've given that knowledge to other people. But again, I've never met that mentor. And if you think about it that way, most of the smart people in the world have written books. Smartest people in the world have written books, and they pass that knowledge down. Read all of their books, because it would be as if they're sitting down to talk with you for 4, 5 or 6 hours. Yes, you may not be able to ever see me, for example, but I've written a book. And if you ask me a question about how do I manage my time, I may not be able to answer that for you, but you do have everything I talked about time in my book, or you will have what I would tell you about money, for example, in the book I'm writing now, or in my second book, for example. And that's the first way that you can think about mentors. Information and getting it from a mentor and understanding how a mentor would think is really what you're trying to accomplish. And there are ways to synthesize that without having a mentor in person. But you can also have mentors in person because sometimes you want to ask questions. So I answer that too. Most have been not in person, but for the mentors that I've had in person, those relationships are usually organic. It's usually because you have some shared environment and similar values, right? And then what actually happens is that they become friends. Mentors become friends. So it's not a case where, hey, can you mentor me? It's we have similar missions, similar values, and we're doing something together where while we are doing the thing, you can ask me questions. While we are going for lunch, you can ask me questions. While we are in the gym, you can ask me questions. While we are working on this property together, while we are investing together, you can ask me questions. And so that's how you get mentors like that. And then you continue to build on those relationships. And you treat it just like you would a friend. You be intentional about how you would deepen and develop that relationship. So again, it's not necessarily going out and sending a Facebook message, hey, can you mentor me? It's not like that. But you'll find people along the way who have expertise in what you're trying to learn. But again, most mentors can be people that you've never met.
Do you think it's worth emulating the traits in people that we want to have in ourselves?
Yes and no. So I will tell you that the most valuable thing that you can have is to have a one-on-one brand. What does that mean? If we are thinking of a monopoly in the world is created because there is no one else that can provide the same product as the monopoly. That's what a monopoly is. And so think about what you can bring to the world. That's a monopoly. No one can tell my story, leaving their room, going onto the couch, renting Airbnb. No one can tell that story but me. I have a monopoly on that story. And you're trying to emulate people, Gary Vee, Mr. Beast, Serena Williams, Barack Obama, whoever else is out there. You're trying to emulate these people, but they were not somebody before they became the most famous YouTuber or the president or the world champion. They were just like you. And then they became themselves, which you can also do. And you can then have a monopoly on you. So you're already a brand. You just need to become it. You understand what I'm saying? And so in terms of emulating, yes, you can take traits of people. For example, I love the discipline of Mark Wahlberg or The Rock, right? I love the charisma of Steve Harvey. I love the speech patterns of Barack Obama. And these are things that you can take from people, but it doesn't mean that you can take everything from them because there perhaps might be aspects of people's lives that you don't like, right? But there are things that you can admire in one part of their life and then not so much in the other, which is also fine.
In the end, we can only be ourselves. Everyone else is already taken, but we can use others to guide us on this journey. But that leads me to my other question, because there are so many misconceptions about success, about college success. And I know that you speak about that in your book. Can you debunk some of them for us?
Sure. I will tell you that college and the way that college is perceived today is changing quite a bit. I think what this generation is finding, and I actually just had a conversation with somebody on another podcast a couple of days ago. What this generation is finding is that the return on investment of college today is not the same as it once was, right? It used to be, you went to college and it was a guarantee that you were going to earn more in your life than what college was worth. But today, that's not necessarily a given, right? What most people respond to me with is most people who have a bachelor's are earning more than people who don't have a bachelor's. Okay, cool. But if we break it down by major, what we're finding is that by major, if you are breaking down the jobs that people are getting after they graduate within 10 years, within 15 years, within 20 years, the return on investment is actually negative on some majors from universities. So it's not just the average of bachelors. The median income by major comparatively with people who can get the same job without a college degree. So would you rather go into debt and earn the same thing as someone who doesn't have a college degree? Yeah, most people would say that's a no-brainer. And so then once we start to break it down that way, we're finding that people in the computer sciences are, yes, that's a really good investment, right? Because STEM, anything in STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, go to college for those. Anything that you have to pay to play, right? If you want to do law, you have to go because you have to get licensed. If you want to become a nurse, right, you got to go because you have to get licensed in these things. But it's not a given that your college degree is going to have a positive return. You can also, if you're thinking like a business, which I think most people should, is that you should try to lower the cost as much as possible and maximize revenue because that's how you make profit from your college degree. So then what people are finding is that they're going to really expensive colleges and overpaying for a degree, which is possible. It is certainly possible to overpay for a degree. For example, becoming a social worker is one of the lowest return degrees on the planet, right? Because what you go and find is that you can go and pay for a social work degree or an architecture degree at a top university, which would have been fine spending 2 years at a state college or a community college, or even going the entire 4 years at a government sponsored college, community college, right? Or just a state college, and then getting the same degree, earning the same amount, and then you as a person maximize the revenue by investing in your own skills, building your network up, etc. But people don't think about it that way when they're 17 and 18 years old, which is why I'm screaming from the mountaintop, please try to think about this is an actual loan that you are signing for $150,000, $200,000. And if you're signing a loan, then you must be thinking about it like a business and you must be thinking about return on investment. Please.
So, looking back, is there anything you would have done differently during your college years or any advice you wish you had received?
I would have done more sooner. I really loved my college years. I think I did it really well. I just should have done more of the things that I wanted to do sooner. What I find is that when you are in the thick of college, you can't think 10 years down the line. But if there's anybody in college listening to this right now, I want you to hear me. Most of the friends that you're talking to right now will just not matter when you are 30. And if you can just keep thinking about 30 years old, it will relieve so much pressure of the things that are in college right now. If you're in your freshman year, those friends don't matter. Parties don't matter. Yes, I'm not saying don't go to parties. Go. I went to parties, but it's not your priority. Comes back to time management, right? If you are thinking who you want to be at 30, then prioritize that above all else. And anyone who does not align with who you want to be at 30, relentlessly cut them out. And if you can think about that, then you can act and enjoy the things that you're trying to accomplish a lot sooner. So then if that involves being an athlete, then that's all you should be doing because you know who you want to be at 30. And then if they are your friends, and if we're going to be honest, you really only need 2 or 3 good people, then the thing that you are successful at when you are 30 will attract a lot of friends around you. And those 2 or 3 people, those will be your real friends. And then you won't be shy or you won't be stunned for people because you'll be successful at 30. But then if you pay attention to all of the distractions, then you will never get to that thing that can attract all these people to you. And then again, if you can just hang on to that ankle of instead of thinking of 3 to 4 months, which is a semester, think 1 or 2 decades, you'll find that just the things that are important to most college students just don't matter in the long run.
I hear you and I do agree with you, but teenagers are teenagers, and that means most of the time they don't manage their emotions really well. And when faced with criticism or doubt from others, how can they stay true to their purpose and vision?
Here's the thing, and that's a very good observation about teenagers, but I think teenagers can think logically, and so then I will pose a logical question. Adulthood is 40 to 60 years, and college is only 4 years. So then what game are you trying to win? The 4-year college game or the 40 to 60-year game. I would much rather get a head start in the 40-year game and crush that game and say, yeah, I can lose this 4-year battle that you guys have going on. I don't care. I don't want to be club president, right? I don't want to be the coolest guy. I don't want to be the most known person. That's fine. Because you see, once we hit 35, once we're playing that 40-year game, once we graduate and I don't have to go to a job and I can go travel South America, yeah, I think we're playing different games and I'm totally fine. You really have to think about which game you're playing. And if you want to play the 4-year game and that's all that you can see, then go for it. But I think most well-thinking 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds will agree that 40-year games make more sense.
I agree with you. So in the end, it's all about alignment and manifesting the dream life. And that obviously takes work. You need to invest time and energy for your dreams to manifest. And you cannot spend your thoughts, energy, time on mundane stuff. It's like you want to buy a house, but you're spending all your money on stuff that have no meaning. And then when it comes time to buy the house, you have no money. So I agree fully with your message. And tell us, for listeners that would want to learn more about your journey or how to invest in real estate or to get your books, where can they find you and how can they connect with you?
Absolutely. I would tell everyone to go to my YouTube. I have so many free resources on my YouTube. It's Kadeem, Kadeem, Rich Journey, Kadeem, Kadeem, Rich Journey. That's my YouTube. I have free courses up there. I make free videos every week. I even have link in my bio, free real estate training. And you can also connect with me on Instagram. I've been traveling for a long time now, and I talk about travels, and you can follow me there. You can also ask me questions because I'm very active in my DMs on Instagram. You can also follow me on LinkedIn and Facebook, but the best place again is Instagram and YouTube, so I can see you there.
Amazing. Thank you for joining us today and sharing your pearl of wisdom. And thank you all around the globe for staying tuned for this episode and wait for the next one. Thank you all.